All set, good people?
Yes.
Okay. And,
You want to start the meeting? And then
yep, yeah. I would like to say good evening to everybody.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't record.
And,
Okay, we're recording.
okay,
Yep.
good evening, everybody. A meeting of the Committee of Infrastructure was held today, Wednesday, February 26, 2025, at 7:32 p.m. in the automatic chamber and duly noticed in two places, including the city's website in accordance with the requirements of RSA 91-A:2, Roman numeral 2. Will the clerk please call the roll?
I'm happy to. Alderman Thibodeau?
Here.
Alderman Sullivan?
Here.
Alderman Clee is here. Alderman Dowd?
Present.
Alderman at Large O'Brien?
Present.
You have 5 members in present, and I'm sorry, Alderman Dowd, you're not in the chamber. I apologize. He has to say why he's not here.
Yeah,
So,
you go ahead, Alderman Dow.
okay, I am not at the meeting personally. I'm recovering from the flu and was advised not to go out in public. So I'm at home. I'm alone.
Okay, very good, thank you. Also in attendance, we have Liz Hannum, Economic Development Director, Mr. Tim Cummings, Administrative Service Director, and we're expecting Mr. Dan Hudson, the City Engineer.
Director Sullivan.
And we also have Director Sullivan, thank you. Okay, public comment, seeing nobody from the public has seen fit to join us, so we'll skip over that. And let's see, next would be, I'm going to recognize Administrative Service Director, Mr. Tim Cummings, and he's going to give us an update on the parking garages, correct, Mr. Cummings?
Yes, that is correct, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. With me also remotely via Zoom is Jill Stansfield, the parking manager, and I believe Director Hannum is in the audience. I asked for a few moments this evening just to give everyone some background relative to where we are with the current parking garage capital renovation project, mainly the deferred capital maintenance. With that being said, our owner project manager, Tim Lemire, was going to give the update this evening. Unfortunately, he was hanging around all Dowd a little too much and caught the flu. And at noontime, he told me he wasn't going to make it, so I'm pinch hitting for him. And with that being said, Mr. Chairman, I have a couple slides. If I share my screen, it may make this update go a little bit easier. And can everyone see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. So again, we are in the very early stages of the Elm and High Street garage renovation project. We started it in the fall. We have a bond authorized. I anticipate that you'll start seeing some contract before you over the next few weeks and over the next couple months as we really start the project in earnest. And so right now we are 100% design with phases 1 and 2. We are currently in design for phase 3. Everything is tracking to be on budget at this time. We will have better numbers, I actually believe, by next week for the first 2 phases of the project as we look to firm up our construction tracks. And so there'll be more to come on that once our construction manager, whom is Whiting Turner, provides us their GMP. So with that being said, just want to refresh the group's memory. We're talking about mainly doing a lot of repair work, mainly focusing on drainage and the capital maintenance on the concrete that has come about through water and the water intrusion into our concrete structures. But we're also looking to make other type of upgrades, and something that I know is near and dear Alderwoman Clee's heart is increasing lighting, and so we do have that on the horizon as well. And this slide gives a quick depiction as to how we're looking to improve lighting in certain areas for the project. And so then finally, we are still in design. We will be doing the construction of the parking office later on in the project, but we are doing some conceptual designs right now for the office renovation. So we are it says 85% complete on design. We're actually like 100% on design, and we expect to have that construction contract before the Finance Committee and the Board of Aldermen probably sometime over the next month to 6 weeks. Just as a reminder, this project does not follow the joint committee process. The joint committee process is for other departments and divisions such as the police, fire, schools, and whatnot. Parking is under general government. There's joint type of process, so the project falls under the purview of Buildings and Grounds, which is also known as the Infrastructure Committee. So with that being said, just a couple of the slides here to kind of show you. This is just to give everyone an update on the expansion work of the joints that was done and some of the immediate structure repairs that we had done recently in advance of the project. So I'll stop sharing my screen now. I anticipate us coming with a construction contract sometime in March, and then starting the project probably in April or May, which is right on schedule for what we had previously discussed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cummings. I think this is a very important project. We, as Board of Aldermen members, just to remind you, you heard it from me before, but we're custodians to city's property. And, you know, I know some boards in the past, this stuff didn't happen last night. You know, it took years to get to this level. I hope as we march on to the future that we have the foresight to stop these little problems before they become big problems. I know if we own our houses, you don't paint them, then the clapboards fall off. So it's, you know, it's part and parcel to the process. So I think that's good. So I thank you, Mr. Cummings, for your update.
Could I?
Thank you.
And now I would like to call, oh, yes, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
That's okay. Mr. Chairman, I had a couple of questions before.
Sure, absolutely.
Tim breaks off. Director Cummings, I know you mentioned that you'd like to commence work in maybe April, May. Could you just let us know for the public that's listening in how long you expect the construction to last?
That is an excellent question, if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So I'm going to hedge my comments to say I want to confirm this with the construction manager who's still developing their schedule. But remember, this is 2 garages, and I anticipate us keeping the garages open the entire time, though we will lose a certain amount of spaces depending on the type of repair that's happening. But we should be under construction for at least 1 entire year, maybe a little longer than that, depending on whether the weather cooperates with us or not.
Just to follow up.
Follow
please.
up?
Thank you for that. Also, you had alluded to it that there would be an impact to some parking, and Director Stansfield was kind enough to give me a tour. I think it was back maybe in December or January, and we, understanding that there are several hot spots around the garage that need repair, obviously those parking spaces will probably be fluid as far as what we lose, but do you have an estimate on total amount of parking spaces that will be taken up, and who's gonna be impacted the most? Will it be the folks that get the leases, or what can you tell us about that, please?
Sure, yeah, absolutely, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. So everyone is going to be impacted at some time or other. Every floor is going to be touched and hopefully refurbished. I would have to check the construction documents to make sure I have the specific number of spaces correct, but it's somewhere in the order of magnitude of 50-ish spaces would be shut down at any one time to give the construction crew enough space to be able to make the improvements that they would need, and we would be shifting that around throughout the entire garage as necessary to accommodate the work, but then also accommodate the lease spaces, or just spaces in general, I should
Sure.
say.
Okay, yeah, thank
Good.
you.
Alderman Sullivan, outstanding. Any other questions by members of the board? Seeing none, again, I thank you, Director Cummings.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point, I would like to invite Ms. Liz Hammond of the Economic Development Director, and she's going to update us on the NIMCO property. Oh, yes, and we'll be joined by Director Sullivan. Welcome.
Liz Hannum, Economic Development Director. If you want to bring up the presentation there. So this will be an update on the NIMCO property as well as the riverfront, and looking for feedback at the end of this presentation as well. So I'm going to go through a little bit of background very quickly here. In 2017, we created a master plan for the entire riverfront, which includes 4 quadrants. The first quadrant is in the Mill Yard area. The second quadrant is Clock Tower to Main Street, which is currently under construction. The third quadrant is from Main Street behind the library to the pedestrian bridge, and then fourth quadrant is east of that. So we created this master plan in 2017 after almost 20 years of discussing the project. And I'm gonna just go through kind of 2007 was when we actually created the TIF district that is funding the projects at the moment. Let's see here. So that was the expansion in 2007. So we actually, I think we started in 2003, I believe. So 2007 was the modification where we added more spaces, more parcels to the TIF district on the east side there. And that allowed us for a little bit of additional funding to get these projects off the ground. And then in 2019, we came up with a master plan for a dog park concept. That would be at the kind of the mouth of Mine Falls Park in the Mill Yard area, with both a small and a large dog area. So we have an entire study that we've developed for that as a gateway into the Mine Falls Park. 2021 through 23, Director Cummings, actually, my predecessor, did an area planning study for the NIMCO property, the building, and redeveloping that site. And we went out to RFP in 2024, but kind of developing that whole plan was looking again at that entire area for what kinds of public improvements we wanted to see, what kinds of private development we wanted to see. So it went through kind of the whole gamut of where we wanted to see that space be and how we wanted to see it being used. So the area planning study got us to that RFP in 2024, where we looked at what kinds of housing we wanted to see in that area. And so this concept drawing came from that study that basically looked at how much housing we wanted to see, what we could do with the area around it. As you see, there's some public space that it was potentially going to be used in that concept drawing, green space, and how we were actually going to redevelop the entire area. So, one back. So that went to RFP for private developers to put in bids last year. We did select one out of the group who was in all three of the proposals. Actually, we're very excited about the riverfront project in quadrant 2 that we are currently doing, the construction, as well as the potential for this quadrant 1 development of the public spaces. So they're really looking to build a public-private partnership where they can take advantage of some of the public amenities that will be in that area, as well as developing housing for the community. So wanted to give you an update. We did choose LMG as the developer. Our master development agreement is ongoing negotiations at the moment. We are anticipating 250 units with on-site parking, which we're very excited about. The site design is underway, and there's public space both that will be existing in the front side as well as the back side. So we're looking at 25,000 square feet of green space, recreational elements along the riverfront. We are now looking at them designing the dog park and constructing it as well. That would likely see a reduction in purchase price. So that's something that we are still negotiating. We would then also want to see a 20-space parking lot in the Mine Falls Gateway area that would attach to that dog park. And that would also be the responsibility of the developer at no cost to us, but would be for public use in the future. Maintenance of the area next to the smokestack would be the responsibility of the developer, which we're excited about as well. But that essentially is going to be kind of the front door of the entire mill yard area, as it's kind of the iconic location in Nashua as well with the smokestack. They're really excited to use that proposed courtyard space for city or city-sponsored events. Things like bringing in, this rendering is potentially food trucks along the smokestack side with the plaza on the front, where they could do kind of Food Truck Friday type events for the public, as well as their residents. So we're gonna also have them design, build, and landscape along with maintaining the riverfront or the river side of the site, which means they are going to open it to the public. There'll be kind of a small area set aside for their residents, but the majority of that space behind the building will actually be open to the public, which is something that we were really adamant about in our RFP process, is making sure that there was public access to the riverfront. And then an easement for any improvements that we want to do along that property, as well as we're hoping to get some parking spaces out of the private garage that can be used for the public during daytime hours and weekends. So these are all things that we're in negotiations for right now. They have not been confirmed, so we're still in that figuring it out phase. But these are things that we're really excited about, and I think that we've got a pretty good handle on both the development side as well as the public side. So this is the latest envelope of the building, kind of from the side view, but also an aerial. So you can see where the smokestack is. Originally, when we were talking about the building envelope and the amount of public space that we anticipated in there, we thought we could get a lot more space and a lot more for the public on the back side of the river especially, but also on that front side. We thought there might be a big plaza that we could have big city events on. But as we get further along in the designing process, we're realizing that's just not feasible. You know, the slope is too steep. There's not enough space to really get anything like an event center, you know, event space or plaza in there. So that's where we're looking at the next steps is what do we do? So this is kind of where we want to start the conversation is we see a lot of momentum in this Millyard Park area, not only with NIMCO, but with the two properties that BIDA is working on redeveloping. They anticipate going out to RFP by the end of the year, fiscal year. This will change hands and start development by the end of the fiscal year, hopefully. We also have seen other properties in the area that are potentially interested in redeveloping. So we're seeing a lot of momentum in the development phase, and we want to get ready to be able to take advantage of some of the public-private partnerships that might come out of that. So something that like the dog park, where LMG is actually going to design and build it for us at a reduced purchase price. We want to be able to take advantage of those situations in the future. And so we're looking at what do we do, right? How do we fund this? Do we want to move forward with this? We do have that quadrant 3 and 4 that are already within the TIF district and could potentially be projects going forward. I know we had talked a lot about putting more boardwalks in behind the library. So that is not going away. We're just kind of trying to figure out what the best avenue is to approach all of it so that we can accomplish the entire master plan at some point. So our recommended actions at this point, now that we've kind of thought through some of these ideas, we'd like to start working on an update to the concept plan to make sure that we are ready. We know what the public wants. We know what the aldermen want to see in that area for development, for public development, as well as for private development. So our master plan is now 8 years old and was approved by a previous aldermanic group. So we want to see what this current group of aldermen are interested in seeing there. However, we don't have a funding mechanism for updating that master plan. So that's what we're thinking the TIF expansion could be. So we're looking at, you know, we have to get cost estimate. We want to make sure all the concepts that we want there are going to be in that concept plan and be ready. And then we would recommend that with that we do an update to the master plan, the legislation. So amend the master plan. Then we would recommend expanding the TIF so that we can actually spend some money on planning, getting ready for any of the future development projects that we could do there. We would also recommend doing the Plan New Hampshire design charrette. So I think you put in an application.
We're in the process of doing that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that would be essentially a free service through Plan New Hampshire, right?
Yes, correct.
So that is something that we're working on getting ready for. And so in the process of figuring out what the next steps are, we've started outreach to different groups, aldermanic groups, the Mine Falls Advisory Committee, the TIF Advisory Board, the Board of Public Works, the mayor and the Infrastructure Committee. So we're trying to kind of do the rounds and make sure that everyone's on board with this process. And so we've got kind of three things that we want to talk about here in this committee. The first is, do we want to take advantage of this momentum and spend some money potentially getting ready for any potential public-private partnerships in the area? What's the funding mechanism? And then what kinds of design elements do we want to see? So those are kind of the three areas where we would like some feedback on going forward here as we start to build this plan. So this is from the 2017 plan. So we already know that this is way out of date because a lot of the things that we wanted to do in the NIMCO space, we know are not feasible at this point. We know that we want to see a dog park there, and that was not in the original 2017 plan. So there are a few things that need to be updated, and we need to start actually doing the plans in order to make sure that everything that we want is feasible. So we have to kind of get a little further in the design to understand what's actually feasible. Because we can concept anything, right? But we need to figure out if it's feasible or not. And in order to do that, we do need to spend a little bit of money. So that's the beginning of the discussion. So we have a little aerial just in case there are questions. But did I miss anything?
Matt Sullivan for the record. No, Director Hamm, I think you did a great job providing that overview of quite a few things and a bit of history. Maybe just a few, if the committee will indulge, just a few not clarifying comments, but hopefully additive comments. I want to emphasize the fact that the timing of this conversation is critical. And it's not simply because we're in the midst of negotiations of the master development agreement for the NIMCO site, which, by the way, will go through an approval process with you. You've approved a form of the master development agreement, but if the purchase price is in fact reduced, if these public agreements are agreed to, all of that will come back before you. So those decisions are not made. We're simply suggesting that that's the direction of the negotiations that we're currently in. And what it sheds light on, of course, is that public improvements are to be hopefully constructed in this area. But the timing is critical, and really as a staff group, we sat down and said, not only is NIMCO's redevelopment underway, but there are several other development sites in this area that are in play. And I don't want to be coy about it or avoid answering what sites those are, but we are hearing that other sites may potentially be redeveloped or upzoned, or upbuilt rather. And we want to be positioned well to capture that redevelopment momentum and that redevelopment when it happens. And frankly, it's particularly critical in light of the recent conversation around fiscal constraint that's happening at the Board of Aldermen level. We know, whether it's at the capital planning committee process or whether it's the budget review process or various iterations of that this board is going to be faced with questions and financial decisions that focus on what the community's needs and what the community's wants might be. And while there's tremendous buy-in that went into the Riverfront Development Plan and tremendous input that went into it, we recognize that the improvements contemplated by that plan, if put up against other critical needs of the community, that those improvements may not be prioritized. And so the reason that we are bringing forward to you the idea of expansion of the TIF district is really twofold. One, the TIF district was contemplated in the Riverfront Plan back and it was adopted in 2017, but the TIF district may in fact be the only reasonable funding mechanism, and that's my word, but reasonable funding mechanism that the Board of Aldermen can support in funding these amenities for the community. And so we're trying to be cognizant rather of the fiscal constraint that the board faces. And so a TIF district expansion is something that we believe may be an appropriate recommendation or action moving forward. And so I just wanted to point that out. I also wanted to just mention that this is the first conversation of this type that we're having. The closest actually is a BIDA meeting that was had a couple weeks ago where we sort of tipped that this conversation would be happening. We mentioned TIF district expansion there. And quite honestly, Alderman Sullivan was present at that meeting. It's because BIDA is doing a lot of work in this space as well and trying to identify ways that their sites, if you will, that you've given them the authority to work on can be the most attractive possible to the private development community as they go through sort of the design and visioning process. And so We have had some side conversations, but this is the first direct conversation that we're having about an amendment to the riverfront plan, potential expansion of the TIF, and then, of course, the public improvements that would go with it. And we're frankly excited about this, and we hope that you might be too, and that's what I'd like to talk about this evening. Liz did mention this, but I just wanted to emphasize again that it's not that we think that the 2017 plan is drastically out of alignment with the community's vision nor with your vision. It's that we want to make sure that when we're talking to an entity like LMG that's doing NIMCO, or a prospective future developer, or frankly, the BITA, that we have a clear articulation of what the community's goals and vision are for this area. And it's been hard for us, I think, to do that when we have an older plan, perhaps not outdated, but an older plan that hasn't gone through a more recent vetting process. You have vetted the second, third, and fourth quadrants more recently, but this first quadrant really hasn't gone through an active discussion, and so we felt an obligation to have a conversation this evening. Just to quickly talk about timeline, we would like to get some sense this evening of whether this is something that the committee is interested in, recognizing this would be a full board conversation. Because what we'd like to do is actually do some very basic concept updating in the near term, with the interest of bringing legislation forward to update the riverfront development plan over the coming 3 months. So this is something that we'd like to move on relatively quickly in light of that momentum that I discussed before. And so this is not something that we're going to go away for 6 months, 9 months, a year, and come back and surprise you with. This is something that you would see relatively soon in the event that we receive some level of encouraging direction from both this committee and then from the other stakeholder groups that Ms. Hannum referred to in the presentation. So we'd like to have a discussion this evening about what you'd like to see in this area, or the general next steps that Ms. Hannum discussed. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Clay.
Thank you. Can you, you probably did, and maybe I'm just a little dense here, but could you explain exactly what the change in the TIF district is, what it was
Yeah.
from what it is?
Sure.
I mean, I know you handed this out here, and I see the pretty blue line and the pretty red line and so on, but can you explain what the physical piece is?
Yeah, so currently, the parcels that are in the TIF district are on the east side of,
I have to stop you. I am
oh.
directionally challenged, so.
The
Left and right.
The clock tower side.
If you go left and right, I'm a little bit better.
Yes, so if you're looking at up Veterans Parkway,
Okay.
clock tower is on your right. All of the properties, the entire TIF district is on the clock tower side.
Got it.
And then goes down to almost past BAE currently. And so we're recommending that we expand the TIF into the 9 properties that are in that little thumb and down to Mine Falls Park. So it's 9 properties that we're hoping to potentially add into the TIF district, so that we can actually do some planning there without having to go to special appropriations.
Follow up?
Yes, so that would include, that's at Pine Street Extension?
Yes, that
Where
parking
that whole
lot.
parking lot is that we're,
Yep, the
in
old-
part of the conversation at another date?
Yes,
Yes,
yep, so
okay.
basically the police training facility, the parking lot, the 3 mill sites, NIMCO, and then the Millyard Tech Park.
And the BITA, so that goes all along
Yes.
Mines, that goes along Mines Fall, that whole area
Yes,
there?
yep.
Okay, but it would not include Mines Falls, obviously, it
Yeah,
would just be
so, essentially from like the dotted line around the little thumb of land there,
Got it.
and then down through the orange lines.
at the 2 mouths of the opening of Mine Falls, then, right?
No, not quite. Well, so the small pedestrian area that's now closed, that would be included in this, but that is city-owned at the moment.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, got it, thank you.
Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. I think, so let me talk about the TIF first.
Yeah.
Well, let me back up. Director Sullivan, you said that this 2017 plan, so that was 8 years ago.
Yes,
The world has completely changed.
agreed.
And now, while I wasn't in city government in 2017, I think I can say with some confidence, we didn't have the housing crisis that we have today, back in
I would
2017.
agree with you if you're asking my opinion, yes.
Yeah, so I think that, so what's changed? I guess everything. So I would say that this does need a Control-Alt-Delete on the plan, I think.
I think I don't know, right? That's sort of why we want to have the conversation. But I agree with you, Alderman Sullivan, that many things have changed. What hasn't changed in that time, as far as I see it, is that there's a continued interest to develop the public recreational sites in this area. That interest persists. And I get odd little boosts of that. Like I hearken back to this, but when I brought the Milliard Dog Park as one of my projects a year ago to ad hoc, there was shocking interest to me in moving that project forward, to be quite honest with you. So I think that's still there, but what you're saying is absolutely true. On the sites that are either city-controlled or privately controlled, there does seem to be an increased interest in mixed use or residential development that perhaps was not as strong when this riverfront plan was done. But certainly when it was done, reuse of these properties was on the mind of Directors Marchand and Cummings and the mayor at that time, but maybe not to the extent that it exists today.
So I'm going to throw a lot of things out. I love the NIMCO idea. I love the green space. I think what I love about this plan is that it reinvigorates that area. It needs it. And there is a lot of potential just when I look there. One thing that, and I know this isn't city-owned property, it's owned by other entities, but as you're driving out towards exit 6 on the Veterans Parkway on the right-hand side, I think it's called Old Cotton Mill, or it's on the right-hand side. I mean, I was looking here, I don't know what the ideas around that are. I see potential there. I see potential at what was, I'm really dating myself here, but what used to be the Milliard Mall a long time ago, worked there. You know, as far as an idea of where that would be. But then one thing I think is really important is if you, oh boy, you just had the, okay, well, we can
sorry,
go
that's my
here.
fault.
Yeah, okay,
That's my
well,
fault.
So, sorry.
right there. So you
Okay.
see where the number 5 is?
Yes.
I think that it would be great, and maybe that orange dotted line makes way for that, but there needs to be better pedestrian access across the veteran. It is, I mean, you are taking your life in your own hands.
So,
Because it's a wide roadway.
thanks to the, if I may respond, Mr. Chair,
Yeah, absolutely.
thanks to the efforts of many, including our precariously placed community development block grant monies through the Housing and Urban Development Department, we funded a pedestrian improvement that will be constructed over the coming year. So we are planning a crossing there with full infrastructure, because you're absolutely right. It's one of those things, it's a preference path, as we refer to them in planning, where people are running across the street constantly. I see it when I'm leaving the city each evening. I'm convinced I'm going to kill a pedestrian and then I can say goodbye to my entire existence. And it's all the need for, it's absolutely a need. And to your point, Alderman Sullivan, with the NIMCO discussion, there has been a lot of focus on how we revision Spine Road, which is that
Yes,
orange
yes.
path. And that's a little bit complicated because it's not a fully public street as it exists today. So there needs to be a conversation around that, but you're right. You don't recognize that as a Mine Falls gateway when you're there. You have to navigate the buildings, and it doesn't feel comfortable getting down there.
Well, it's an awful condition, too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Could I just say one thing on TIFs, please?
Absolutely.
Thanks. Since I've been an alderman, we have not added a TIF, expanded a TIF, created a TIF. They were all in existence before I got here. I would appreciate, before we have the discussion around the TIF, that we get maybe, if you would, a re-education on what the TIF is.
Sure.
My concern about what I know about them is if we start expanding the TIF into this area, that will have at least 250 units of housing.
Yep.
It's my understanding, the way a TIF works, that not all the money goes into the general fund. Portion of the money goes to pay off whatever you borrowed, which I get it. However, those folks will need police, fire, teachers, and all of the services that we need to help those folks. And if some of that, all of it, I don't know what percentage of it, doesn't flow into the general fund, then, do you understand my concern?
Then,
So
I mean,
maybe
to
it's-
complete your thought, it's.
Maybe
the-
there are carve-outs or maybe something like that, but maybe I'm just misunderstanding it. But that would be my concern if we just do we just color in everything in the thumb that you called it and said, that's our new TIF. My concern would be around that.
I think it's a great opportunity for us to come back and do that. And I think the board gets an education every couple of years. But you're right, Alderman Sullivan, there hasn't been a modification in your time on the board. It's a little more nuanced than what you said, but you're not far off. And so I think we can come back and talk about that. The fundamental cost of services is something that should be discussed. Because certainly, as tax increment is directed towards these public improvements and the other vision of the TIF, there is I don't want to call it degradation because I don't think that's fair, but there is an impact to the essential cost of services payment that's made to the general fund, and I think that's a conversation that has to be had.
Sure.
We may end up feeling differently about that, but we need to discuss what it means if this is going to be done.
Yep.
I can just do a very quick 101 on a TIF, just for anyone listening, is when a property gets put into a TIF, if it's $1,000 a year in taxes, that $1,000 will always stay in the general fund. So if the following year it's $1,020, then the $20 goes into a small fund, the TIF fund. So the $1,000 stays in there always. So there will always be tax money coming in from those properties when they get put in, if they're paying currently. So the 3 properties that the city owns, though, those are at $0 right now. And so all of the increment would end up in the TIF if we do that. So that would be pulling future tax dollars from the general fund. However, the idea behind TIFs is that as we develop public properties and new development projects, that we see bigger and better projects going forward because the city's investing in that area, and so then private development throws their money behind the city's development as well. So it's kind of a catch-22 that we need the money in order to bring money in, and we do see it usually takes 10 to 12 years to, like, we started the TIF in 2003 and didn't start construction on the project until 2023. Or 2024 rather. So it took 20 years to get to a place where we could bid for a larger property. So the increment, we do see a lot of potential development in there. So there might be a good amount of money coming in over the next few years, but it's just the increment. It's not the base tax.
I would just add, it's, and we'll discuss this when we do an overview, but the theory, of course, is that although the public spaces would be created through the taxpayers in this district, right, that these improvements would be funded fully by them, well, they may not pay quite the share of those core services that the other taxpayers are paying. They're paying for all of the improvements that, in theory, and I think this is the test we need to undertake, in theory, these improvements should benefit everyone. I mean, perhaps not all Nashwans because they may have their own dog park in their area of the city, but these improvements are intended to benefit everybody. And so the taxpayer that lives elsewhere outside of the TIF district would not be contributing to this, but it would be a public amenity. So it's,
It's an accounting.
it's a good conversation to have because TIFs are an interesting mechanism. They are an accounting mechanism. But we should talk about it in detail because it has to be discussed. Yep.
Alderman Clay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to add to that conversation, if I remember, I wasn't here when the first TIF was created, but I was here when we talked about the TIF for the flats and so on. So I was here for that one. And if I recall correctly, we put a timeline. We had the discussion on that, and we can do the same for any TIF. We don't have to make it forever.
Right,
We can put that provision in and say, this TIF goes for 20 years, 30 years. Or we can say until a certain project has been created, that's part of the master plan. This body can do that. So we don't have to make it a forever thing. Am I correct on that? So we don't want, I personally would not want it to be a perpetual forever thing. So to my colleagues' comments, we don't want them to just be forever taking care of that. It would be for a finite kind of project, get something started, and then start putting the money back into the general fund, and then that would be taken care of as any other kind of thing would be.
That is how most TIFs work.
Right,
Yeah.
so that's how we would want to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I mean, unlike something maybe like where the Jackson Falls is, something where that TIF was kind of created to keep and maintain that whole location and area. That was an agreement that was made when that was built. That TIF was created as part of that, them coming in, creating the project. I have no idea what the agreement was with that TIF, but I do know when I hear people talking about that, that was part of the agreement of that being built, or at least this is what their concept is that when that was built. I don't know if there's a time frame on that. I don't know what anything is on that particular thing.
Well, so there's a statutory sunsetting that's required.
Yeah.
But Alderman Clee, I'm not, I believe you're still referring to the Riverfront TIF, just the other end of it, perhaps?
Yeah.
And the Riverfront TIF has changed several times. It was originally established, it was quite small.
Yeah.
As Director
It's
Hannum said,
grown,
it was
yes.
expanded, yeah, in 2007 to that larger red line diagram that you saw.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is it's a logical next step. I think it's just, as Director Hannum said, you know, we will be asking, I should say, to reprioritize, not abandon the work near the library, certainly, but to reprioritize based on what's happening here. And I do think we may regret it if we don't, but we need to make that case to you as part of a subsequent conversation.
And if I'll just follow up with that is, as Director Sullivan mentioned, the timing around this is important because we're looking at all of the development of these properties, and in order to be prepared for that development and to do public-private partnerships, we have to be able to concept plan and to get ready to do the development work. And we can't do that without funding so the only funding mechanism is the TIF expansion or a special appropriations, which we don't want to do because we have the ad hoc committee spent all this time planning for that. And so this is kind of the only mechanism we found that could allow us to get ready for development work.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Alderman Sullivan.
One comment, and maybe it's a question, but I look at that mill yard area, and a Nashua Civic Center. I mean, just throwing it out there, lots of parking down there, easy highway access, would be a nice bump in the arm for a lot of downtown businesses, trade shows, events, things like that. You know what, I'm just thinking out loud, and that's all. And I'll just leave my comments there. We don't need, not looking for a discussion, just throwing it out there for food for thought. It would be, I think it'd be cool, because I know there's a lot of mid to larger size cities up and down the East Coast that have civic centers, and I think that that's maybe a need that we could fill. And that's it. A great plan.
Hands up.
Very good, thank you, Alderman Sullivan.
Alderman
I'm
Dowd
sorry.
is online
Yeah.
too, sorry.
Sorry, we can't see you.
Oh, there you are,
Alderman
yeah.
Dowd, yes, sorry.
All right, yeah, I just wanted to add to the conversation. I've been around when the TIFs were formed. And in many instances, when we take the monies that we raise from the TIFs and put it into development here in Nashua, it significantly increases the values of the surrounding properties. And those properties sometimes are acquired and even improve more. And it adds more tax revenue to the city. So I think that's an important piece that may have been missing in that discussion.
Okay, thank you, Alderman Dowd. Any other questions by members of the committee? Ms. Hannon, do you find you're satisfied with the board's response to some
Yeah.
degree?
I think that gives us a really good place to start,
Yeah.
and to come back to you with not only education on TIF,
Right.
but, you know, the conversation on what it's gonna look like.
Yeah, okay. All right then, before we move on, can there's something else coming up later in the agenda. It's 025-048. I do have a question on that might be right up your alley. So if one of yous want to stay, I see Mr. Sullivan is bailing
Yeah,
out
no
at
dodge.
30,000 feet, okay.
parking related?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, don't
yeah,
worry.
yeah. All right, Mr. Sullivan, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, so you can stay right there, Liz, if you wish. And, all right, let's move on to communications. I turn to the clerk.
From Lisa Photo, Director of Public Works, regards to referrals from Board of Aldermen resolution. From Wayne R. Husband, PE City Engineer, in regards to Division of Public Works, support of pending legislation.
Okay, there being no objection, I'll accept the communications and place them on file. Okay. Next, in front of us is 024-34. I see on the note here that will be discussed at the March 26, 2025 infrastructure meeting. So we'll postpone that. New business resolutions to the clerk.
R24-126, authorizing the mayor to enter into an amended federal aid program project agreement with the state of New Hampshire for the purpose of installing rectangular rapid flashing beacons and to accept and appropriate an additional $86,344 for the project. Mr. Chairman, I motion to recommend final passage by roll call.
Okay. Bear with me. Okay. Discussion on the pending motion. Alderman Sullivan, you were thinking?
Well, no, I know that Mr. Hudson is online, and he talked about it briefly last night at the meeting, but I'm wondering
Oh,
if he
okay.
could recap it, if he would be so kind.
Yeah. Mr. Hudson, who is our city engineer, would you like to offer your opinions, please?
Yes, I would, Mr. Chair. Thank you, and good evening to the committee members. Good to see you again, Mr. Chair, back in action here. So I did discuss this last night in a meeting last night, but our 25-126 is relative to amending our agreement for a project that we're developing here in Nashua. It's called the STEP project. It stands for Safe Transportation for Every Pedestrian. The project involves us enhancing and improving 3 mid-block pedestrian crossings in downtown. We would make improvements such as build bump outs, put in rectangular rapid flashing beacons, enhance pavement markings and those sorts of things, try to make those crossings safer. Those locations are Canal Street at Railroad Square, Kinsley Street at Chestnut Street, and Kinsley Street at Vine Street. So this, as I said, this is an amending an agreement. We already have agreement with DOT. We took bids on the project. Pricing came in a little bit higher than we expected. So this receives and allows us to appropriate over 80,000 additional federal funds and expands the project so that we can move forward to construction. We're ready to go. Like I said, we bid this out. We have a contractor lined up. We just need this funding amendment in order to be able to move this to construction in the spring. And I'd be happy to address any questions.
Fantastic. Any member of the committee have a question? Okay, oh, yes, Alderman Clay.
No, just a comment, if I have this correct and I remember correctly, this was an 80-20, is that correct, Mr. Hudson?
Mr. Chair, if I may, yes, that is correct. It's an 80-20 split with DOT. It's 80% federally funded. Those funds are passed down through DOT and through the DOT's local project administration project. We manage the project, but it is an 80-20 split. And, you know, I do reference also, I forgot to mention, but one of the communications was from Director Photo. The Board of Public Works recommend approval of this as well. They found that to be the case on the January 30th meeting.
Thank you.
I do have a comment, Mr. Hudson, if you don't mind. In my traversing Main Street, I do see some of our heroes they use the crosswalk, but they don't press the bloody button. And so the lights don't work and everything else. And I think the lights are a very important safety aspect. So I'll take this as my public service announcement that if you're going to cross where these devices are, please press the button. You know, particularly now in the darker winter, I think that would be, you know, prudent, you know, so. Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. I love this project, especially the Kinsley Street areas of Vine and Chestnut. I take Kinsley Street to get here for every city meeting, and it's harrowing down there for some pedestrians. So I think that this is a really good idea and a good use of money. So yeah, I'll support it.
Very good. Alderman Thibodeau?
Yeah, question for Mr. Hudson. So the total is 672,000 and some change. Is that for the ones that have already been installed, or is that just for the 3 remaining?
Mr. Chair, if I may, yes, that
Yes,
is
you may.
for those 3 locations. Work has not been completed to any extent at those 3 locations, so it's for completely new construction at those 3 locations.
Okay, further comment or questions from members of the committee? Okay, seeing none, I will call for a roll call vote. To the clerk.
Alderman Thibodeau?
No.
Alderman Sullivan?
Yes.
Alderman Clee is a yes. Alderman Dowd?
Yes.
And Alderman O'Brien?
Yes.
You have 4 yeas and 1 nay.
Very good. Moving on to new business ordinances.
Okay,
To the clerk.
that's O25-048, regarding parking for tenants of 14 Court Street.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend final passage.
Okay.
And if I may speak, and by roll call, and if I may speak to this,
Yes, you may.
thank you. Alderman Clemmons is not here to be able to speak to this, and he did ask if I could talk to this, and let's see, I did bring it up and put it on, this is the location of the, so this is the library here. And off to the right, this is what we would think of as the regular library parking lot. And this is the very hidden kind of library parking lot that is not used. And this is the location that is in question for the parking spaces that's being discussed that's being discussed within this legislation. So if you'll indulge me and let me just bring up the notes so I make sure that I hit all the high points that Alderman Clements has asked me to bring up. He stated that any entity who's regularly rents from, this would belong to any entity who regularly rents from the Court Street, gets passes for $10 a year, up to 5, except the art studios, that will only get 1 per studio. The theater groups can only use while they're using that facility, with the exception of the Peacock players. They will have it on regular. So that would mean something like the National Theater Guild, while they're using it, they would have 5 spaces. And please, at any time, Director Hannum, please correct me if I'm, or please correct me if I'm incorrect. One of the things that he did mention was that this is a city-owned building, and the reason for doing it this particular way versus a commercially owned building and doing that is that he felt that as a city-owned building, much like, and if you look at the legislation, it talks about the Delaney's House, the senior center, and so on. He felt that as a city-owned building, for those that are paying rent and so on, that we should accommodate them in that particular way, as we do for the other types of building. And as you can see, that's where the space is. It would limit it, as you see in the legislation, it limits it to 12 hours per day with no overnight parking. The tags are not transferable, meaning that you can't give them to somebody else. So you can't purchase it and then say, okay, well, I don't need it, I can give it to, to another business within that area. The $10 is based on another Delaney's House and so on, because that's what we charge for the Delaney's House. That's why he went with that particular type of thing. And the reason for this was because the free parking that they were using at Temple Street has gone away. They used to be able to park at the Temple Street, but the owner of that, it is a private lot, and the owner of that has decided that he wanted to now charge, which is within his right. He is free enterprise and so on. He has the right to charge for parking, and he has decided to do so. So that's why. So they were just kind of left high and dry. So those within the 14 Court Street were now suddenly having to pay for parking. And as the city, again, they're renting from the city, and I believe Liquid Therapy is now, as Director Hannum has stated, they're now paying fair market rent for their space, where before they were not paying quite as much, but now they're paying fair market rent and so on. So as part of that, it was felt that they should have some parking spaces. And I believe it's just going to be 5 parking spaces that will be part of this. So it's not like we're giving them 10 or 20 parking spaces. So that's part of what this legislation, did I hit all the high points of this?
Yeah.
Director Hannum?
Yes, you may.
Yes, Liz Hannum, Economic Development Director. Yes, this was in response to kind of a last-minute loss of parking on a private lot. So this is to help out the tenants of the city.
I do have a question. Is this a forever contract? In other words, what happens if a particular business closed down?
So, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
it would transfer to whoever rented in that space.
Okay, so
for example, if Liquid Therapy, they couldn't take their 5 spaces with them if they were no longer a tenant of the city, but it would stay with whatever business opened in that space. They could get the 5.
Yeah.
And if I may?
Yes,
And-
Alderman Clay.
Thank you. And it is very clear within the legislation that makes it not transferable. If you're not part of 14 Court Street, you cannot take your parking spaces with you. So if the Peacock players were to leave and go somewhere else, they cannot take their parking spaces with them. And the truth is, the Liquid Therapy is the only for-profit within that building. The rest is all nonprofit.
Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. If they get a permit, does the permit say 14 Court Street lot? So when you say they can't take it with them, I mean, it doesn't just say, it's not just a general sticker that they can go around the city and park anywhere.
Correct,
Okay.
yes. So it would not be a universal pass, it would only be for that library annex lot.
Okay. Needs a new layer of asphalt. Same.
Well,
Yeah.
The $10 won't go a long way towards maintenance, but we,
Painting lines.
yeah, exactly.
Who would be responsible for the plowing and,
That will still be the city, so
Okay.
the city will maintain the lot. We have not had much use for it, other than as snow storage or kind of overflow parking
Yeah.
when there are events and things. So we have maintained it and we will continue to maintain it.
so the costs that we would be charging would cover the extra plowing and whatnot?
It's unlikely that that would cover the cost, but we're doing it anyway.
Yeah, well, it is a convenient factor to the people who are renting our spaces.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Alderman Clay.
Thank you. There's also one other factor that I did want to add to it. Within the legislation, it also says is that the parking cannot be used during events. And that is clear in the legislation. So if there is an event that is happening within that parking area, they are not allowed to park there.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes,
So-
so for like Pride,
Right.
or the Multicultural Festival, or
Right.
Back to School Night, they would, that lot would be closed.
Yes. So for any kind of city event type thing that's happening, that is not available for them.
Okay. And for my edification, the farmer's market is still held down there?
It is, yes.
And we anticipate this spring it'll be back
Yes.
in that parking lot?
Yep, so Sundays, it would be considered an event, so that would be closed until 2 PM.
Okay. Other questions? Yes, Alderman Thibodeau.
First, I'm glad you brought that up, because in my head, when I was reading this, it was the spot behind Liquid Therapy.
Oh.
So I'm glad that this was brought up. And to Alderman O'Brien's point, just doing the quick math, I mean, we're talking about $1,000 a year max, right? I mean, so.
Yeah, so we have about 25 spaces back there, so that would be it would be
No.
$250 a year.
Right.
Yeah.
It's something.
It is something.
$250 more than we get now.
I could have fun with $250. A new fishing rod. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Anybody else on the committee?
Wait a minute, let me see if, I'm sorry. I'm hiding Alderman Dowd.
Yeah, Alderman Dowd, we bring up the main screen, so unfortunately you're blocked off, so if I don't see your hand, just speak out, you know.
No, you're muted, Alderman Dowd.
You're muted, Alderman Dowd.
Yeah, I'll say something
Thank you.
if I put my hand up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, then if we're all set, I'll call for a vote via roll call.
Okay.
I turn to the clock.
Okay. Alderman Thibodeau?
Yes.
Alderman Sullivan?
Yes.
Alderman Clee says yes. Alderman Dowd?
Yes.
And Alderman O'Brien?
Yes.
That's 5 yeas.
Okay. Director Hammond, thank you for staying.
Yeah, of
You know,
course.
because I knew there would be some questions. Thank you for your clarity. Okay, moving on. I turn to the clock on 025-049.
Thank you. If you'll indulge me, Mr. Chairman, do we have to For O24-034, did I have to make a motion to table that? Or could we just?
I'm taking that it's not ready for
Okay.
prime time.
So we didn't need to do
So
anything?
it will be discussed.
Okay,
It is for a time slotted
okay.
for the March 26th meeting.
I
Yeah.
did not need to table.
Does say
Yeah,
that on
so
the
I
agenda.
think that'll give us plenty of time to prepare, look at the ordinance.
I
And
just didn't know, she had it here for me to table, so I didn't know if I needed
Oh.
to table it.
Well, if you want to do it,
I don't need to necessarily, but,
I think because it's written on there, that you don't have to do anything with it.
Okay.
Okay. So
Yeah. In
Okay.
theory, it hasn't been introduced yet, so
Right.
it
I'm good with
doesn't
it.
have to be tabled.
Okay.
So I think we're, yeah.
O
If
25,
not, we'll say that we just tabled it. Yeah, okay.
everybody's watching.
Hi,
O
everybody.
25-049, authorizing stop signs on Lovell Street at its intersection with Chestnut Street. Mr. Chairman, I motion to recommend final passage by roll call.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Hudson, would you like to give us a background of this, please?
I'd be happy to, Mr. Chair. So I believe this came through Alderman Thibodeau. We received a request to look at the intersection of Lovell Street at its intersection with Chestnut Street. And there's a communication in your packet from Senior Traffic Engineer Wayne Husband. He indicates that installing stop signs on Lovell Street merely reinforces the existing traffic pattern. There's 4 legs at this intersection. The 2 minor streets need to stop, and so providing stop signs will just enhance the safety of that location. So Public Works is in support of it, and I'd be happy to address any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hudson. Is there any questions from Mr. Hudson or anything? Comments? Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. Does this, so I'm trying to, I have it up on my map here. Does this turn this into a 4-way stop now?
Mr. Chair, I'll respond. No, it doesn't. Lovell Street approaches would need to stop, but Chestnut would not need to stop. It is recognized that Chestnut is a dead end, on one leg of the intersection, but you have to prioritize a through movement, and it makes sense for Chestnut Street to be there because Lovell Street is kind of a jog across the intersection between the 2 Lovell Street approaches. So we think it makes most sense to structure it with stop signs on Lovell.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, any additional questions, members of the committee? Seeing none, I'll call for a roll call vote. I turn to the clerk.
Okay, Alderman Thibodeau?
Yes.
Alderman Sullivan?
Yes.
Alderman Cleese says yes. Alderman Dowd?
Yes.
Alderman O'Brien?
Yes?
You have 5 yeas.
Okay, motion passes, and when you're
Okay.
caught up here a little bit,
Uh,
I'll move on to petitions, which I don't think...
There are none,
There are none. And there is an item still tabled, and we're going to keep it on the table if everybody's in agreement. It's the petition for L. Deerwood Drive. And so now I'll open it up for general discussion by members of the committee. Seeing none. Good quiet bunch this evening, thank you.
Hey,
Uh,
yeah, I
Yes,
had my hand
yes,
up.
you
I was
may,
just gonna
Alderman
say,
Dow.
Very nice to see you back in the chamber, Alderman
Oh.
O'Brien. We've missed you a lot, and I'm glad to see you back in the fold.
Well, I'll tell you, Alderman Dowd, years ago, I fell in love with a beautiful girl, and we've been together for 41 years, and she took over as part of my nursing and everything else, and according to the doctors, he says I'm kind of like a phenom in a way, with a rapid recovery. Of course, that's testimony to the good work that he did. But, I thank you, and I thank everybody for their well wishes and prayers and concerns and everything else like that. And it's good to be back. So, thank you.
Alderman O'Brien, if I may, as well.
Yes.
I would like to echo what Alderman Dowd said. It's good to see you in person. You're looking great.
Thank you.
And I also, I know that she left, but I know Director Hannum, was out for a little while as well. It's good to see
Yes.
her out and about and back here in City Hall. So it's good to see everybody's on the mend.
Yes. Alderman Clay.
I'm going to echo my colleague's words. It is nice to see you back. I'd like to see Alderman Dowd back. He has been under the weather as well. And Director Hannah really wasn't here. She's not supposed to be here. She's been a very bad girl.
Okay,
She's too dedicated to
All right.
us. So
now I'm in trouble.
she is too dedicated to us, so she is not supposed to be here.
She's welcomed before this committee.
She's always welcome here, but she is overdoing herself, but it is nice to see you.
Yeah.
It was nice to see you come through that doorway, but Alderman Dowd, we want you back here to get healthy so you can come back. So,
Yeah, I'm trying to get there.
yes.
All right.
That's from having having your grandchildren there. You don't have your grandchildren immunization yet.
Yeah, get 4 of them, they'll pour me out.
Yes.
Okay, I have used the joke in the phrase, it's good to be seen and not viewed.
Yes.
For myself. So we'll leave it at that. But moving on to public comment, and we have an empty chamber, unfortunately. So I'll turn to Alderman Sullivan.
Oh, I would like to make a motion to adjourn this fine meeting by roll call, please.
Absolutely. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Happily, if I can find the list. Alderman Thibodeau.
Yes.
Alderman Sullivan.
Yes, please.
Alderman Clee says yes. Alderman Dowd.
Yes.
Alderman O'Brien.
Yes.
You have 5 yeas.
Okay, I'll declare that the meeting is closed at 8:49 PM, and I thank everybody for their attendance.